Welcome to the Echo Centrals podcast.
I'm Dave Dale.
And I'm Chris Pekarski. And on today's episode, we have Councillor Justine Mallah in with us to talk a bit about some housing, affordability, renovation type stuff. But before we get into that, we want to thank our title sponsor, Source for Sports.
Spring is here, and that means one thing. Baseball is back. At Source for Sports North Bay, we're proud to be part of every pitch, every catch, and every moment that brings our community together on the diamond. Whether it's outfitting little leaguers for their very first game, helping local teams suit up for the season, or simply sharing a love of the sport, we're here for it. We're more than just a sports store. We're neighbors, coaches, teammates, and fans. And we're proud to support the leagues, schools, and families who make North Bay's baseball scene so special. Wherever your sports journey takes you, make sure you visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street so we can help you along your way.
So Dave, this is the second time I believe we've had Justine in the last 6 or so months, give or take. She came in with you before I got here. She was very bubbly and warm and very prepared. I thought the conversation was great today.
Oh, I think she's a positive note on council. She comes across very genuinely, and she tries her best. She has a lot of different things in the back of her mind she has to keep track of that she can't say because there's, with her job with the health unit and with her job with the city and other things, there's a lot of details there but she navigates it very well.
Yeah.
And she tries very well, very hard, and she came in prepared.
Yeah, I think this is the first time that I was able to meet with her. I thought it was fun. We've been discussing an email form, getting on the show for a bit now, and this predates before the ward system episode dropped in terms of just kind of talking to general councillors. And she brought this forth and we were like, this is a great idea. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about something that was very pertinent in the last little while and something very, very specific to the city and to people who might be looking at purchasing a home or accruing additional revenue. But we connected really early. I think it was off camera, but she was referring to posture and everything else. It was really funny. And then she made a mention of Princess Diaries, which is a movie starring Anne Hathaway. And, my teammates here didn't understand. I understood. The movie's great. I just want to put that up for the record. Dave, thoughts on the movie?
Well, it's clear that the Princess Diary movie is definitely in your bailiwick.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What makes you say that?
Because you have cats.
Oh, is that reason?
Yeah, that's it.
I like good cinema, man. Honestly, cats aside. So there is a... bring out my cats. Catching strays.
They're pretty close.
Okay, yeah. Well, two of them used to be. So, but no, it was they aren't currently. I'm sorry, Jessica. No. So I mean, it was a great conversation. The big thing was I'm gonna get the name wrong, but it was the relation to the housing action and community development plan or activity, which is essentially aiming to kind of give city or residents of the city opportunities to kind of renovate or add to their house, to kind of add a livable dwelling as per code, to give more options for renters to live and potentially people who are having this place and having the work done, an extra source of income. And I think this is really interesting because it's coming at a time. I would wish this would have maybe be a little bit earlier because I think it would have been pertinent a couple of years ago, but it's still pertinent today, right?
Well, I think it follows the federal election, right?
Yep.
And the federal money, $10 million over 4 years, that allows for up to $25,000 for renovations for
4 additional dwellings, I believe is what it was classified as. But no, it was great. I mean, again, this is always fun for me because we all have our experience and expertise. But for me, Dave, you love to rib me on the fact that I'm not super caught up on City Hall. I'm getting better. I'm trying. But for me, it was.
Do you watch the council meetings?
No, I would like to.
That's a good place to start.
I would imagine so. I do read some of the minutes. I am more familiar with minute reading from prior working at, going eons back now.
Pretty late reading in the minutes of the city. They don't have any detail.
It works for me.
Yeah.
But going back in previous jobs, minute reading was always kind of easy. So I know general things, but maybe I'll have to sit down and watch a full-length, long-form episode of City Hall.
I think you deserve having to sit at city council and take notes sometime just to get the full sort of understanding what journalists go through.
Tell us how you really feel. See, this is where we make fun of each other, is that you say how journalists feel.
Yeah.
Again, for those who've been watching the show and maybe been following me in some capacity, like I'm from a PR background. Dave's obviously a journalist. Similar skills, different execution, different delivery.
I have both public relations and journalism experience.
Right. Okay, he wants to claim both hats. Okay, that's so be it. So fine.
So I know the limitations of your experience.
Yeah, but the limit. What a dagger. But no, I always think it's fun to talk to city councilors. I mean, we invite them on all the time, and we like to hear their conversations. And at the selfish level, I get to ask questions about things that I want to know more about, which is a whole different thing for later.
Yeah, because you're in that cohort that are considering your first home purchase, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a lot involved with that. When my son was asking the same questions, like, how am I going to ever afford a home with the way things are?
Because it is tough. Make no mistake. It's not as easy as it used to be.
Well, in 1996, when I purchased my first home with my partner at the time, we couldn't have done it on our own. We had to combine our incomes and use our RSPs as part of our down payment. It's never easy. And the interest rates were higher. And it's always a struggle. Even when the house we bought was $107,000, it was a big part of a monthly budget. It took a lot of it. And then the renos and the other costs associated with homes. It's always hard and scary. Mm-hmm. So I don't think much has changed except for the stakes are I think the biggest problem here is people having to understand or worried about whether or not their home's going to be worth as much as they're paying after 5 years because of the volatility, and then all the programs putting new housing in. So there's a little bit more. We never had to think about that part because we always understood that the house asset would appreciate.
Yeah.
We're not so sure now.
I mean, I think that inherent risk is always kind of there. I mean, as I say, as a not homeowner, I understand the concept, right? But and I don't have the data with me on hand, but I do know that I think to afford a house that's valued, with interest from, in 2025 to 1995, it's a larger percentage and portion of a person's salary to afford the same kind of house prorated over time.
Especially renters.
Yeah. And so that's part of that discussion today too. And, Justine wanted to talk more about, affordable housing and the plan for that. And we kind of alluded to that at the end of the episode. But there's a lot of good talk about what the city is looking into doing to kind of maybe lighten that burden on different kinds of people in the city who are looking at it. They're making their house payments more affordable or finding a place to stay that is, maybe like less competitive in terms of being less expensive, just giving people, renters and rentees, tenants, the option.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
no, it's good.
Yeah, and I think we can't wait for you to listen to it. Obviously, we have a couple different points that we want to talk about at the provincial level because we don't talk about provincial politics a lot since I've been here, but I know you did want to. So did you want to cut into a little bit or?
No. Actually, I think the conversation with Justine covered a lot of good bases. I think people would be. Yeah. You might come up with some more questions, and please put them in the comments because we want to cover that even more, a little bit further along the lines. We talked about how many people have applied for this program so far this year.
Yeah. And
we'll find out whether or not we exceed what was last year, and so that's good.
Fair enough. We did talk about how
pretty sneaky, eh?
That was. I mean, I also forgot about what we talked about pre-banter, but that's okay. We'll get Ben to take care of this and edit it out. But we did talk about what responsibilities fall upon provincial and federal governments in terms of how this funding happens. Mm-hmm. And Justine was pretty quick to mention this was coming from a federal grant and how things changed with the election and everything else. And so it's interesting to see how that continues. Just to kind of get fun for a second, let's talk about something that is not Canadian, but involves a Canadian. You have any thoughts on what blew up this weekend? So we're recording this for the sake of, this is me just being an instigator, just to kind of get a rise out of Dave Dale. So we record this on June 9th. This will air next Thursday after that. But this past weekend, we saw the Titan fight in terms of bickering on Twitter between Trump and his boy Elon. Thoughts and opinions, Dave?
Well, if you have two immoral people with too much money and not enough character, they're definitely not going to be able to maintain their partnership or any cohesion for long. So this was, in my mind, expected that the little kids would start fighting over the toys.
Honestly, that's a good way of putting it. It felt like there were no adults in that room, and there was no adults in that conversation, and what proceeded.
It perfectly captured the entire situation in the White House today.
It's a mess. It's a mess. And so, like, again, not that, I have a lot of talking points for our federal government currently. There are certain things that we could probably get into later that require some further discussion. But it makes me happy that, like, our house is kind of tidier in terms of it not being a circus. I like to live under a house and not a circus tent, which it feels kind of like what the state's going through right now. So,
yeah, I've talked to a lot of people that are very upset with the situation they're in America, that they're no longer the adults in the room, and nobody's even pretending to be. So it's a scary time.
Yeah, lots going on. So
we could talk about Ukraine making that big blow up. Right? They did a wonderful job of proving that Russia isn't capable of necessarily protecting itself or sustaining its war. So hopefully that drives them to a peace talks for real.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so, because this has gone on long enough. People deserve justice.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we'll on a lighter note, we'll cut it to the episode. We'll save maybe some more foreign politics for our future episode, because that would be, that's juicy. Maybe we'll put that in the future docket.
That'd be good.
Yeah, some international foreign relations. But until then, enjoy our episode, our conversation with Justine, and we'll throw it to us now. So let's do it. On today's episode, we have City Councillor Justine Mallah. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Oh, we're doing this again. Justine Mallah.
Mallah. Justine
Yes.
Mallah.
So if you watched the last podcast with me, we talked about my last name.
The one with the shovel thing.
in a
That one?
bit too much detail. Yes. We also explored that mishap.
Well, welcome back to the studio. This is ridiculous. Welcome back to the studio.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming in. And today we're going to be talking about something that is very 2025 centric, all about and housing and budgeting and how it goes and looks in the city. But obviously, feel free to tell the listeners and our viewers like how you've been doing, what's going on in your life, just kind of like a nice little reintroduction to yourself. For those who might not.
Sure. How am I doing? I'm doing great. Enjoying the summer.
Yeah.
No, but I wanted to come on here to talk about housing because there's been questions around, for instance, the federal grant money that's going towards the community center at Omichelle, around why can't that be spent on affordable housing? And we know that there's a housing crisis. And so I wanted to chime in to talk a little bit about the great things that the city's doing around that, including the community improvement plan and also the Housing Accelerator Fund money towards our Housing Action Plan. So I know that's a little bit of jargon, but that's really what I want to be here and chat with you folks about. But happy to connect and spread some awareness about what I'm doing as a city councillor and how I'm contributing.
So this is important for me because I would like to own a home at some point in the future, but I'm also like not super great with numbers. So I would like you to, if you can, in the most like layman terms or most understandable terms, kind of explain what the city's action and community growth improvement plan, is that how it is? Like how does that look in terms of someone who's looking at buying a house for the first time?
Okay. Okay. So where do I even start? So, let's just say in early 2023, we, the city developed, it wasn't exactly called the Housing Action Plan, but it was a version of it. I think it was Housing Community Action Plan or something similar to that. And essentially that was created to try to get, basically to try to increase the housing stock within North Bay and also to try to get federal funding for housing. And so we weren't successful the first time, but the second time we were very successful, which we are very proud of and very lucky to have received $10.6 million from the feds over 4 years. And so we did make some changes to the Housing Action Plan, which includes revising our GSIP program. So the GSIP program is the Growth Community Improvement Plan. And there's 4 pillars, but the one I'm talking about today is housing. And so these changes include, for example, the ability for any property owner to add 3 additional dwelling units as of right. So every lot essentially can have 4 units on it.
Okay.
One of those can be an accessory dwelling unit, so a unit that's separate from the main building. And there can be essentially within the building, it could be a triplex. And so what used to happen is there used to be a complete rezoning process to turn a single house, detached home, to a triplex or to a duplex, and that's just not required anymore because we've implemented policy to add housing. And so for a potentially first-time buyer, I would argue that having the opportunity to add an additional dwelling unit, which really became implemented in 2018, that was when we allowed 1, the province allowed 1. And then that increased to 2 additional dwelling units in 2023. And then this year we did 3 additional dwelling units, and that's within the settlement area. So basically like the urban area of North Bay. And so by doing that, folks who are interested in purchasing, you have the opportunity to add an additional dwelling unit. And I'll talk a little bit about the incentives for that later.
Yeah.
But that can increase your ability to afford your home because you'll have that additional income. Now, also through the Growth Community Improvement Plan is the inclusion of the incentive, which is 75% up to $25,000 per additional dwelling unit.
Okay.
So you could apply for that $25,000 if you're adding in an additional dwelling unit, which is really huge, right? We haven't been seeing a lot of funding from the federal government specifically into housing for a very long time. I
think it ended in the 90s, eh?
That's what I was going to say, yeah. So there was a lot of cuts in late 80s and early 90s around affordable housing and housing development that came from the feds. And so this is really the first time that the federal government's getting back into contributing to housing, which is huge.
I think that's where the province got out of it as well in the same time.
Yeah, a bit after it was downloaded to the provinces, and then I think it was in 1998 that it became DSAB's responsibility when DSAB was created. Mm-hmm. It was downloaded to municipalities, and then it's a little bit complicated in North Bay because we have social services that are that was not supposed to happen. That was regional. For the district of Nipissing, whereas our municipality is just North Bay, right? So now social services looks after social housing. And but the city is really trying to work with DSAB and the province and the federal government to do what we can to increase housing. And so those 4 units as of right is a really big step. Yeah.
And I think the other encouragement, and I'm not sure, was it last year? Did you guys put a pause on the not charging development fees? Because you weren't charging development fees for a while. Are we now?
So we are charging development fees. However, for houses that are 1,500 square feet or less, so it's at a 50% to 100% reduction in development fees. So 1,200 or less square feet, no development fees. 12 to 15 is 50% off the total cost of development fees for those houses that would be over 15.
And what is it?
Square feet.
Do you know the development fee for, say, a $500,000 house? Like is it 10,000 or 20,000?
I believe over 15, it's just over 9. About 9,000, just over 9,000.
Oh, okay, so
The details are on the website.
Around 10 grand.
Yeah,
I mean, I
you'll see
imagine it
that.
would fluctuate depending on the square footage of said property, because you can list a property that'd be valued at, $500,000, but like, I would assume it would be beyond the 1,500 square feet, but this person doesn't really quite understand square footage at large.
I know, but
I know there is a threshold at a certain point where it's like, well, it's likely to be that, right?
Yeah. I think what you have a square footage sort of, but there's also they know how much per square foot
Right.
it will cost, and then you know what your percentage is, right?
Yeah.
So what's the uptake like?
Huge.
Yeah.
So super interesting. This is why I wanted these
Nope.
these cards
Yeah.
here, so I get the numbers right. But I think I'll remember them. So in 2022, we saw a steep increase in the amount of additional dwelling units. So we saw 20, and then the next year we saw 22, and then last year we saw 36, and this year already we saw 14. And so if you add those all together, which I'm not going to try to do, I think it's above 80.
Yeah, I can ballpark that.
Okay.
87, but I'm just
Okay,
kidding.
mathematician.
No way. The comments are going to rip us apart for not being able to do math.
Well done.
Ben can do that. Can you calculate those folks?
I'm not ready for this.
Okay, but anyways,
Yeah.
so I did this. I did this comparison in the last interview. But essentially, if you think about that, that's like an entire apartment building, right? And how many resources would go into an entire apartment building? You'd have to increase the water main size. You'd have to add, go through a whole zoning and rezoning, and you'd have to construct the building, and it would be millions of dollars, and it'd be like staff time. There's just so many elements. But this was just a policy change.
Yeah.
We only just started administering the half the housing accelerator funds from the federal government. So these benefits really just started recently, and we already have how many, right? So it's significant. So there's a few other benefits to additional dwelling units. So it increases affordability, like I mentioned. With someone who wants to buy a house and then adding an additional dwelling unit to supplement their income. But then also, there's the supply and demand argument, right? The more rental units there are, hopefully, the less expensive they will be.
Right.
But also, it promotes aging in place, multi-generational living. We have an aging community here. And so having the opportunity for an additional dwelling unit, whether it's someone who is a senior living in the additional dwelling unit, or, owning the additional dwelling unit to have someone else live there to support them, that's huge. The other piece is talking about the environmental benefits and the sustainability benefits. For instance, when someone who is who owns a house and has an empty basement, they add an additional dwelling unit. Well, now they're adding, they're making more with less. So whereas you'd have to pay for heating the whole home, well, now there's someone living there, and so the carbon footprint is decreased. Also, just the cost of adding an additional transit stop, or adding more infrastructure that's no longer needed because we're adding density. To further the point about the environmental aspect, is it's decreasing sprawl. So we're taking advantage of the infrastructure that we already have, and we're not kind of adding on and making North Bay larger and larger and larger. We're just kind of adding infrastructure and adding units wherever possible.
Is there a change to the parking requirements, driveways?
I knew you were going to ask this, so I really got a good handle on that. So, parking requirements. For one, there is a decrease in the number of parking requirements needed. However, not such a decrease that it would cause extra congestion on a street, for example. So, one unit still requires 2 parking. 0.5. So the second unit would also require an additional parking unit. However, if there's 3, so where are we at? So, okay.
2 plus 1 plus
It's
another.
everything's 0.5. So,
Oh, okay.
so 2 units for 1.
Yeah.
The second unit would be 3.
Uh-huh.
3 units would stay at 3. 4 units would go to 4.
Okay.
Yeah. See, math is not the best, but I did it.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, so we've decreased the requirement of parking. However, it was done so in a mindful way. And then, of course, we'll still be promoting active transportation. And what's really great about North Bay is the fact that everything is pretty close. And so that's also excellent.
So just to kind of piggyback off Dave's excellent question, does this impact any kind of, number of garbage or recycling things you can put down to the road? Because if you're adding more dwelling, I mean, obviously there's more people who's going to be living in the area. It's the same address. Would that change how many bags can get picked up?
I think that's an excellent question, and it's not something that has been discussed, at least on my end.
Okay.
But definitely something that I can bring back to infrastructure and operations and see. That's something we'll probably monitor.
Yeah.
Do you guys still sell extra tags for extra garbage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Probably going to be the answer. Yeah, you can have more garbage if you buy more tags. Put it on your rent for the extra unit or something like that.
However,
That's
what
just
I will say, though, is the more that we promote recycling, the decrease in waste we're seeing, which is quite incredible, and obviously something that we'd like to see, right? Because that's just
I've got another, not maybe is an excellent question, but a question nonetheless.
Trying to, butter your bread here, bud.
Yeah. How much square footage property do you need to be able to put an extra standalone unit on it, the property? Like a new
structure?
Like there's setbacks and stuff. It's
yeah. So
not every property can fit another.
Yeah. So as far as I understand, on as long as it meets the requirements, you are able to add an additional dwelling unit. It has to be. It cannot be 2 floors. It has to be 1 floor. It has to be smaller than the original. But in regards to setbacks, et cetera, you'd really have to look on the website and ask the professionals because I don't want to provide misinformation.
Is there a minimum size for? Is there a minimum size for what we used to call a granny suite like that?
So the granny suite language is sometimes used for illegal. No. It's not. It doesn't sound. No. So there are legal units, right? That they go through building code, and then some folks want to add in a granny suite to have a family member stay, and that's perfectly allowed. However, it's not through the building code, and so technically, we're not calling them granny suites. We're calling them.
Oh, okay. So it's a term used.
Yeah, it's just that's a different.
Didn't
term.
realize it was a legal term.
I didn't realize that either.
I wouldn't say it's not a legal term, but it's just that can add confusion because for it to be a legalized dwelling unit, it needs to be it has to go through building code. Like there's requirements in terms of safety. And so just not all granny suites, the way that they are.
What's the minimum size for a house under the building code? Is there a minimum?
For what?
Well, what we're talking about is a little house, right?
Yeah.
So it needs
what
to
is the
have-
minimum size that you would have to be under the code for someone to live in?
So it can be a smaller modular house. It could be a tiny home as long as it has all of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
As long as it has the running water, as long as it has the electricity. In regards to the exact sizes, I don't know I can't speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have to be under the building code. Yeah.
So at the concept, what I'm hearing, even though I think I was kind of coming at this okay, well, how can I find ways to afford a home of my own?
Yeah.
This really does seem like more of an option to suggest that we can encourage and create more housing units in the city on what was relatively kind of already pre-built infrastructure, like houses or plots that are already there, right? So it seems like this would obviously help benefit the growing student population. So obviously help the aging population for those who might want to, keep a family member close or in case they don't want to go through the other processes. That seems to definitely be the intent here, right? And
Exactly.
the idea is you want to make sure that people have the backing, the understanding framework at the city level to kind of go through and do this instead of just kind of doing it on their own or putting forth the money themselves. You want to give them some sort of incentive.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes, through the federal government, through the HAF funding, we were able to have those incentives. And there are additional incentives as well. For example, the rebate of all municipal fees, for example. We're also, there's a professional study grant where we cover 50% up to $5,000. And so if you're interested in adding an additional dwelling unit, you'll need a professional to come and look at the space and understand if it's possible based on the building code, et cetera. And so we cover half of that.
Okay.
And so we're trying to make it as easy as possible. Plus, there's additional incentives for affordable units, specifically larger projects that are affordable. But then also we're working with DSAB to add incentives for the affordable units. Yeah.
Hey, North Bay, it's time to celebrate. The city is turning 100, and Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay invites you to the party. Be at home in our spacious suites, each featuring a kitchen. Yeah, a real kitchen. Also, enjoy our comfy living spaces and brand new fitness gear so you can keep feeling great while staying on budget. Planning a big bash or business event? We've got the perfect meeting spaces right here on site. Plus, with our partnerships at The Grand and Stock Transportation, your guests and delegates are in great hands. Want to know the best part? We're right beside the beautiful Cape Paceway, steps to North Bay's lively waterfront, and moments from downtown's shopping, dining, and entertainment. Celebrate the Centennial with us all year long with an exclusive discount. Just use the code CENTENNIAL when booking your stay. Be at home with Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay. Join the party today at 495 Oak Street West or call us at 705-495-3000.
Dear North Bay, as a single mom and full-time student, life can feel overwhelming and budgets are always tight. But one thing I never question is how deeply I care about my community. When I began volunteering at the North Bay Regional Health Centre, I saw firsthand how much the healthcare system means to people, especially when life takes an unexpected turn. It made me think, what if it was my child, my parent, or my friend that was in need of care? That's when I realized I wanted to do more, to be part of something bigger than myself. I joined the I Give monthly club because even a small monthly gift can have a meaningful impact, helping ensure everyone in our community has access to the care they need right here at home. If you believe in strong, local health care, I hope you'll join me. Sign up at nbrhcfoundation.ca or call 705-495-8125. It's simple and it matters. With gratitude, Kim Cosgrove.
So my question for you, aside from just like the general, work of, doing all this renovation and building, what are the barriers for people? And it's like there's a whole lot because people are coming to City Hall to do this. What are the barriers, if any, that exist between someone doing this and just getting it off the ground?
So what's another part that I mentioned at the last episode is, sorry, I'm not being center, is the citywide portal. Yeah. And so that it's an effort to modernize City Hall, which I'm very excited about, because essentially what we did was streamline the building process. And so all of the documents and requirements that are needed are very clearly outlined on that portal. And basically it helps new folks who aren't familiar with the process really step by step in what's needed. Also, there's always staff who can answer questions, and everything is just available on the city portal 24/7. So you can pay there, you can see the status of your project, basically in real time, and ensure that if there's other members, if there's, say, other project folks who are involved in, this doesn't make sense. If there are other people who are involved in the project, they can also get access to that citywide portal. So if you have a builder, for instance, who's working on this ADU, they can have access to as long as you permit them. And so everyone will be always on the same page, which is great.
So would this have any kind of interwoven connectivity with something like the Ontario Landlord Tenant Board? Like if someone wanted to become, like, I mean, obviously looking at renting out part of the space and renovate to become a living area, like would that person who owns the place who's doing all the work, like would they have to register to be a landlord? Was there some sort of worked in agreement there? Something that they do legally to make sure that they do everything correct?
I don't want to say anything wrong. That's the first time I'm hearing of that. However, I definitely would speak to the planning department and the building department, and they can ensure that all those questions are answered.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't mind taking a guess at it.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
I have unlimited liabilities. You definitely, if you're going to be a landlord, you want to talk to your insurance company.
For sure.
For a change of insurance. And also you need to talk to your bank as far as changing how you're doing it. You don't have to sign up for to be a landlord, but there's if you have a problem, you have to go through a process to register to put a complaint in.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, if there's something else, but I don't believe you have to join in an association of any kind to rent out your space.
Yeah, and I was more or less kind of just poking around, like not to because I'm looking for an answer because I genuinely just don't know. Not that I'm looking at becoming a potential landlord. I currently rent, but I'm sure it's something that might cross people's minds. But like, okay, well, if I do this, do I have to go through any kind of hoops, so to speak, that are outside of North Bay City Hall that I would have to kind of make sure I'm doing, dotting my I's and crossing my T's, right? Because I'd imagine there's some things you have to do, like going through your bank and insurance, but that's stuff that kind of operates outside of this.
The building code requires with this type of development following that and being inspected and in place for that activity. So that kind of takes care of some of the legalities as long as you meet the building code for renting.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and then that's again the having a legal dwelling unit. That speaks to that.
And if you're going to do short-term rentals, you have to go through a different process.
Exactly.
Of course. Fair enough. I mean, this is all really interesting to me just because, again, I'm not in that realm yet. I would like to be. I mean, it's been, I mean, we always make jokes, Dave and I, here on the show lately about the difference of generation and what you have in terms of equity.
I've rented to people before.
Oh, yeah, have you?
Yeah, I don't recommend it.
I mean, I know this is the tough part about it. This is a different conversation, but we're just going to entertain it. Yeah. It's tough because, like, being a landlord or a person who rents, dwellings can't be an easy job in terms of if there's a number of them, like that might something to keep track of. But I mean, I'm also erring on the side of being, understanding to the renter, the tenant, like, and how, that's not necessarily a win-win solution for them as much as it is like a place for them to live. I'm sure people my age, my generation, would like to eventually, be told that you can purchase a home because it's what we were always told. Right. And so I think in terms of what this solution is trying, what this, problem that this, initiative is trying to solve is good because it's giving people who maybe can't afford a home or can't rent a dwelling right now under the current circumstances or who want maybe a less competitive market. It gives them an avenue to kind of get in there and get started first. Right. I think that's the initial premise.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And I will also mention that this housing crisis is not just happening in North Bay.
Yeah.
It's happening in Canada and beyond, really. And so it's just one thing that we're doing to try and help alleviate the issue, but there needs to be intergovernmental partnerships happening with feds, with province, with municipalities. Like it's taken since the 90s, really. This is when this has started to really occur. And the policy failures were happening. And so that's how long it'll take to get out of this situation.
Justine, can you tell me a bit about this citywide portal? Because this is the first time I'm kind of hearing about it. And Dave and I joke about how I'm not connected to City Hall maybe as much as I would like to. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. So...
you said it modernizes or updates or...
So essentially, it is a website, a portal, where... builders, property owners can go to who are interested in building an additional dwelling unit or another project to ensure that they're following the process. Whereas before, folks had to come into City Hall, they had to get all of the information about what's required, speak to staff, have their documents done, and then oftentimes the printing alone on some of the documents is a challenge because the documents are so large. But now everything's basically done online.
Yeah.
And folks used to have to go in to pay. Now they can do it online.
Okay.
And so all of the documentation, there's a checklist on the portal. Basically everything that is required is clearly stated. And if there's anything that's missing, staff will let the person know through the portal. In addition to, you can get email updates, I think, to provide information about the status.
So last year we had like 30 odd people take part in this program.
I think you said 14, didn't you?
14 is this year.
This year.
so-
Okay. My apologies.
So again, citywide portal is new. But yes, so 36 additional dwelling units created last year.
So in the interest of getting it higher, I mean, obviously, Googling through the portal and listening to the show, how else can, people living in the city kind of get this going or, really lean in to this initiative?
Oh, we've already seen a huge increase in applications.
Right.
A huge increase. Also, like building housing units in general, we're seeing an increase. At the last council meeting last week, we provided final approval for 2 subdivisions, which will result in at least 24 new units, right? So I'm very optimistic that
But you only pick one more than last year.
oh my God.
Yeah. But that's okay.
Just
So,
because I really am strategic with betting.
I'd like to
And
see
I'm
you at the
betting that
casino.
it's-
This would be cool. I'm going to go over then. I think we're going to be over 37. That's my bet.
Okay, wait. Okay, no. So you're going to be do it like no, the price isn't like the price is right.
Chris
Oh,
has
$1
lost control
over.
of the podcast.
Fine. Okay.
You've commandeered the ship, my friend.
Fine, you can do your bet and then I'll do my final bet.
Okay. What's your final bet?
No, you have to share your bet first.
It's going to be more than 37.
Okay, and I think it's going to be more than what you think is going to be 37.
It almost took as long for us to find the website.
Yeah, I know. That's funny. Okay. No, I'm thinking it's going to be 40. At
Why?
least.
Why
Because
do you think
I
it's
love
40?
that. Yes.
I think there's some growing optimism that Trump's on the wane and Carney's on the up as far as people's optimism going forward financially. The American financial situation is kind of in turmoil, but there's basically starting to disregard all the tariff stuff. The U.S. is going to have some hard times paying tariffs to build houses. So we're going to have more supply available here in Canada, and we have programs like this and others that are encouraging housing. So I'm thinking people are going to be optimistic, and there'll be more than 40.
What a cheery, rosy way to put that.
Yeah.
Yeah, very optimistic, Dave.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, I think this is great. I think this is well intended, and I want to see it, continue to be executed and see how the city and members of the city kind of go with it. Because I think again for me as a renter, and as a tenant, I've been in my current place for would have been December 2023, I guess. So I've been there for a bit, and I think I would be of the interest to see renting prices in the city go down. I think it helps everyone to have more affordable units. It helps those who are, maybe have a different kind of dollar budget in terms of the end of their bottom line, who maybe don't make as much money as someone who could own it. And we need to give people more options. Therefore, it makes it more competitive. They might want to make this, the dwellings, more dynamic or whatever. It just helps to have more options for the tenant in this place, the customer, right? Or whoever you want to kind of position it as, because it gives them the choice instead of no choice.
Exactly. And there are additional programs in place to assist with that as well. So for instance, DSAB has their home ownership program, which helps. There's a wait list for it, and you have to have certain eligibility criteria, but it allows first-time home buyers who fit the criteria to have, I think, up to 10% of their down payment paid as a forgivable loan, which is huge. And then there's also the tax breaks that are happening at the at the other levels of government. So there's definitely pros. What is interesting though, when I was doing some studying for this podcast, is that the percentage of first home owner buyers is decreasing, and the amount of investors purchasing properties for assets is increasing. And unfortunately, that's been going on for like about 10 years. So
It's much easier to buy your second home than your first.
See, this is the part that's pessimistic. This is the part that depresses me, is that like, I just want a home.
okay, but I have something else that's positive. Okay,
Please,
so
please.
in 1970, I learned that the federal Minister of Urban Planning said that essentially that housing is a fundamental right of Canadians. And this was echoed by the Ontario Ministry of Housing in the following year in the 70s. But then there was the cuts that started, right? But in 2019, the federal government put in legislation that housing is a fundamental right again. So we're seeing that kind of language, and we're seeing investments happening in the other levels of government as well as with here, right? Like we're making policy changes that add to decrease that hopefully will decrease the housing crisis. And so I'm feeling positive. Also, the federal government used to build houses back in the day, right? In the 1940s, the victory houses, which I'm in one, which were kind of small, again, like single family dwellings, small homes. And so, but now we're seeing more of an investment from the federal government, even with cooperative housing, which again stopped for many years. They're putting money back into it. So I think we're going to see some change for the positive.
Good. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
And the adverse side to that is that when you're calculating what could be revenue based on current rents, the current rents will likely go down when the demand goes down because it's being achieved, right? So there's a whole bunch of different factors as far as, if you're trying to predict how much it's going to cost. But Chris, here's a possible solution. I got a spare acre in the backfield.
Brother, I you know what? I love working with you. I think if I had to see you outside my window every morning, we might have a different dynamic relationship.
But I'd have so much fun.
Oh, I'm glad you would. But I mean, Justine, I think it's been a great conversation. We do thank you for coming in. Is there anything that you kind of want to highlight or acknowledge or say to the listeners or the viewers before we get out of here today in terms of this topic?
I feel like viewers are going to say, okay, but what about affordable housing? After listening to this podcast, they're going to be like, okay, so what about affordable housing? And we are looking into, it's a bit tricky because as I mentioned previously, there's DSAB and there's city. And so we are trying to make it as easy as humanly possible to incentivize affordable housing units. I know DSAB's working hard as well to play their role, but I think that there's still a lot more that needs to be done, and I think that we just need to continue to work with community partners, which I think is part of it, but specifically other governments, continue to advocate for additional subsidies, really looking at the definition of affordability and making sure that there's also deeply affordable living spaces as well. I think it's so needed. Anyway, that's probably what I will share. But anyone who wants to say that we didn't talk about affordability enough, fair point. I agree, and I wish that I could say that we're doing more, but it's not something that is being ignored, at least on our end. We are really looking at further incentives, like I said, for the GSIP program for affordability and accessibility, and anyway, we'll see.
Well, that sounds like a nice little preview for a potential future episode, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
For sure.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it, folks.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Councillor, we appreciate you being on here today. If you have any comments or anything you want to share with us, feel free to let us know. Subscribe to our newsletter on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, do all the good things. Again, thank you so much for listening to the Equicentials podcast.